author by night, urban planner, and civic leader by day, and host of this wonderful podcast, Miami's Home for Readers, Writers, and Resources. And today is our 13th episode, lucky number 13, but it's okay. It's not Friday. We checked. And I'm honored to have a local author from Pinecrest, Florida. His name is John David. John, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And John, as I said, you're local. You live in Pinecrest. You are a PR strategist and crisis communications consultant by day, correct?
Yes, sir.
And continue to be an author by night.
Absolutely.
All right. And if you see here in the front of the table here, we have a couple of John's books, The Bystander and The Pawn, both fictions, both thrillers, I believe.
Yep. Yes,
Excellent.
sir.
So, John, let's start with your career first. What do you do? And then how did that translate into writing fiction? Sure.
So I've been a public relations consultant my whole career. So I started, right when I first got out of college, and worked in the PR industry, PR agency world primarily. And I don't know, for 20 something years, I was a day-to-day publicist. Mm-hmm. So I talked to, newspaper reporters and television reporters, and I pitched my clients and, wrote byline articles. And, back when newspapers were more of a thing, my clients were, in the Miami Herald or in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal,
or social media,
that kind of stuff, pre-social media, pre-internet, that world. And then as the communications world evolved, so did my career. And I'm no longer like a day-to-day publicist. I'm not really on the phone every day talking to reporters. I do more consulting. I do a lot of work with CEOs, do a lot of corporate messaging, write speeches, and I have a lot of I do some crisis communications work specifically, and so my business has really evolved from being like publicist out there trying to get press for people to, sometimes responding to situations, and then also doing more higher level marketing work.
And all of that knowledge and experience must come in handy in promoting the book. But I would imagine it's also, since you're a writer by profession, that it's also handy in writing the book to begin with. And so what caused you to not transition, I suppose, but to go from strictly representing clients to essentially writing fiction and becoming a client of your own, or perhaps somebody else?
So it's absolutely helpful. It's very helpful to have a PR background when you're pitching a book, because most of the time there's you'll find this in fiction and nonfiction, whatever. There's no bigger advocate for your book than yourself. Yeah. So I started off, working as a publicist. So I wrote lots of press releases and byline articles and things like that. And I had a pretty active blog, and back about 10 years ago now, I got an idea to write a business book. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote a business book. I was just sort of crazy enough to do it. I went through the process. I wrote a business book about online reputation issues. Mm. I was fortunate enough to get to pitch that out into the agent community, and I got a literary agent, a nonfiction agent, and they sold my book. And in 2016 it came out. It's called How to Protect or Destroy Your Reputation Online. And so that was my first foray into publishing. And I'd always been like, we all read, right? It's on some level, we all know how to read. And I was probably, when I was single many years ago, I read a lot of novels and thrillers and things like that. And I wasn't really like a book a week guy, but I was probably a couple books a month guy. And I read a lot of John Grisham and thriller mystery writers. And then when I got married, your life changes, right? And something's got to give. And so I always kind of say, like, my novel reading went away. My golf game completely collapsed. And and when I did have time to read, I usually read stuff that was related to work, or I read business books, or I read, I read nonfiction when I was on vacation. I just grabbed something and go. And then once my kids were grown and out of the house and in college, I found myself with more time, and I started listening to a lot of audiobooks when I exercised in the morning, and I kind of reconnected with thrillers and novels and mystery book novels. And then one day I just kind of had an idea, I had an idea for a novel, and because I had publishing experience, because I felt, I kind of felt like I understood the form enough, I was just crazy enough to write it. And so that's where the idea, that's how it happened.
Yeah. And that genre is particularly, what's the word here I'm looking for? Particularly relevant here in Miami-Dade County. There are a lot of writers writing in that genre. Obviously, Carl Hyacinth,
Sure,
and
yeah.
some others. Some are a little more.
Hyacinth's the king.
Yeah, humor. Some a little more serious.
Satire, I think. Probably
is that another reason maybe why you gravitated towards that? Just because that's kind of a.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's when you know. I mean, so it's interesting you say that, because I mean, Carl Hyacinth's definitely an influence of mine. I mean, I've read all.
I think I've dropped his name every episode I've had.
It'd be hard not to. He's really, and he's Dave Barry's written some mystery novels as well, and there's a lot of other folks who have Miami ties. Paul Levine's is another one. His series, Jake Lasseter series, Miami based, and so there's definitely mystery thriller writers in Miami. For me, I actually chose not to set my books in Miami because I kind of feel like that's like rarefied air. Like I didn't want, not that anyone's going to compare my work to Carl Hyacin. Like, I don't feel like that's like happening right away. I was like, I don't even want to invite that type of comparison. I'm more of, so my books are actually based up in North Florida, Jacksonville.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your books then. We have The Bystander was your first, right?
Yep.
And that was published in 25, so not too long ago.
Back in September. Yeah.
And fairly quickly started drawing attention. I believe it won the Page Turner Awards. You can tell us about that. And
sure.
Well, tell us about the book and about the protagonist. It's Pete Lemaster, right?
Right. Correct.
And Pete is I'll let you tell the story.
Sure. Yeah. So my protagonist is a television reporter. His name is Pete Lemaster, and the first book opens up, and this all sort of happens in the first chapter that anybody can read. It's the sample chapter everywhere. He's a television reporter. He's kind of out on a Friday night. It's the night before a big football game, and he's just out at the local outdoor retail complex talking to fans. It's a big weekend, and he's out there just doing he's like a happy-go-lucky reporter, and he's just trying to tell the story of the fun weekend. And he's at this big outdoor retail complex, and at a certain moment, there's an active shooter incident. So a guy enters the retail complex with a rifle, and Pete flips his camera around, and dives for cover, and ends up filming this incident where the active shooter is killed by an armed bystander. Wow. It's actually inspired by a real life event.
It sounds a little familiar.
And so there was actually an incident like that happened in a mall in Indiana about 4 years ago. And
unfortunately, this is happening way too often.
Yes, that's true. That's absolutely true. And so he films this whole thing, this really dramatic footage, and the video, he sends it to his TV station. The video goes viral. The armed bystander who kills the active shooter becomes a hero. But everything is not as it seems, Javier.
So he gets pulled into that.
So, and he gets right, and so the mystery kind of goes from there, and that was the start of that's the start of the series, and it talks about the book. The book is it touches on some political issues, I think, some hot button issues. It talks about gun rights a little bit, talks about veterans issues a little bit. I've been told that it's not in a preachy manner, which is what I was going for. I was really going to tell a good story. And I've been fortunate. The book's gotten some recognition. It won the Page Turner Award in the mystery category in 2025. And also won an award called the Story Trade Award. It was a finalist, and was also one that I'm really proud of. It was actually named one of the best thrillers of 2025 by bestthrillers.com with some pretty rarefied air there, actually. Some pretty impressive writers there. So it's so far, critical acclaim has been great. And the second book just came out in May, basically about a month ago.
That's a quick turnaround. So did you write it in between, or had you already written?
So quick turnaround is might not be accurate. So here's what happened. So I wrote the first book in 2022.
Okay.
And it took me about 18 months to find a publisher. And so when I had I'd started the second book.
Right.
I'd rewritten the beginning of the second book like 3 or 4 different times. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. But when I got signed by the publisher, they asked me if they told me that they really like to, they like to sign you for a series.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd already written the first book, and they said we would like you to write a series. And so I said, okay, I got the second one kind of figured out. I can commit to a 3-book series. So I did. So then I finished the second book was actually finished around in early 2025. So the second book was done before the first book came out, and the third book is actually the story's done. I'm in developmental editing already. And
do we have a name yet you can share?
The third book's actually called The Pretender.
The Pretender,
and it comes out in it's scheduled to come out in March of 2027. So
same protagonist,
same protagonist, right? Similar, another mystery. And so the second book was, like I said, it was done before the first one came out, and so and it is a pretty aggressive schedule, that they ask you to file.
Especially if you're successful with the first one, you want that second and third kind of to not be too far out, or people start to lose interest in the series, right?
Yeah, there's definitely the from my publisher's point of view that people like to that people binge read the way they binge watch, binge watch TV, they binge read. And so they want that. A lot of times they're really not paying much attention to what's happening until that second book comes out.
And I understand. I think series are just becoming more popular. People are just used to that because of the TV series and other things, right? And binge watching. So
yeah.
So I just so you're aware, I have a series in the works as well. I'm publishing my first book, self-publishing. I have to say, I haven't been lucky enough to find an agent. Not that I looked very hard, and but I must be crazy because mine is a 9-volume series. So
that's a lot.
I'm like, let me see if I can get just the first one out and see how that goes. But I think series are the way to go, and especially in this category, right?
Yeah, no, it definitely. I think that there's there are a lot of stories to be told, like that from my perspective. I've dream up different ideas all the time. And so I'm not, it's the most intimidating thing is actually not it's not conceptually intimidating. It's just time. It's just, you gotta sit down, you gotta knock it out. And that's the big trick. And when you're not full time,
right.
You got.
Now is Pete is Pete cast after someone in particular? Is it you? Is it the reporter that you knew in the business, or is it some combination of things?
It's probably a combination. Definitely not me. I would say sensibilities. Maybe he has like my sensibilities, maybe my sense of humor a little bit. But Pete's a television reporter. I've never really put an age on him. He's right around probably around 30 years old, something like that. I'm 58, so he's not me. And a lot of the characters are drawn from my interactions over my lifetime of in just life, and my professional life, and things that have happened, things I've seen, and there's no real like this person's that person, nothing like that, but that everyone, you draw from your experiences, you write about what you know about.
Now, often I find with some of these characters, these protagonists, particularly in a series, they have some kind of quirk or something unique about them that's just a little different, good, bad, or indifferent. What is special about your character?
Well, I think that's a really good question because I think that that's one of the biggest challenges for me is I really focus on the story. Like I want the story to move. Like I like when I'm really happy when I'm writing is when I feel like the story's cooking. When I like get to the end of a chapter and I can drop something in there and make somebody goes, oh wait, now I got to flip the next page.
Well, that's why you won a page turner.
That's right.
Or presumably.
That's right. And so, and I had a conversation with my editor just like a week and a half ago, and I said, does your character do they have to grow like a lot? Because like I read books where it's like, like for example, does James Bond grow as a character? Maybe a little bit. Maybe they've, as a little bit of a switcheroo, they come and they say, okay, we're going to make James Bond, we're going to get him married, right? Or whatever. But for the most part, James Bond is James Bond,
James
right?
Bond.
So
He's never becomes 008.
Yeah, he does. He doesn't like grow some crazy like a crazy conscience, right? He's not all of a sudden, he's not all of a sudden, whatever, driving a biodiesel car,
God forbid.
So I think that there's, but at the same time, within the mystery thriller series world, the readers want your character to evolve,
Yeah.
and so my character has kind of gone from being, like I said, sort of this happy-go-lucky television reporter to being a little bit more serious, and to being a little bit more serious about his craft, and I think that's been the evolution of the character so far. He doesn't have a crazy quirk. I haven't developed anything like that.
So that's interesting. So we live in an interesting time when it comes to media and journalism, and we don't need to get into the politics of it. But in this media, in this world of social media and people wanting instant gratification and clickbaits and all this, one might argue that many quote unquote journalists or media personalities are becoming less serious, right?
Sure.
Are you writing him that way, you think, maybe subconsciously to kind of push back on that?
Well, I think that in my books, actually, there's typically I talk about that world a lot, and not specifically with my main character, but oftentimes the other characters that are in the book, and the way that I have a journalism background, so I went to journalism school. I went to the University of Florida, and I have a bachelor's degree in PR, but I was in the journalism school, and so I took reporting class, and I took these writing classes and research classes, and so I took law of mass communication and things like that. And now, it was a long time ago, and it's like, I'm not trying to like toot my own horn over some crazy education I had, but I learned about journalistic ethics. Some people say it's an oxymoron, but the rules of the road, and those rules have changed. And so a lot of times, in my books, I have where my characters have encounters with media personalities who are in that strange little world, right? They're not necessarily, like, for example, there's some TV personalities out there on network news shows, and they don't call themselves journalists. They call themselves commentators. And they don't feel compelled to necessarily be balanced, for example, which is something that we always strive for in the journalism world, right? It's to be balanced. And so sometimes you get that. And so I've definitely had characters in my books where we address those types of questions. And it's fun because they're out there, there's these folks out there on TV talking heads on TV who are just saying whatever comes into their mind.
It's crazy. And those are the ones that are getting the clicks, right? And the viewers and the eyeballs.
It's true.
And that's the problem, right? Even if you're a journalist who wants to, stick to the traditional journalistic ethics, you have bosses who want eyeballs.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a business at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So you're almost forced to kind of do some of that, sometimes against your will. I feel for journalists right now. And they're all under attack. The ones who are trying to do the job well are just getting beaten up by those who don't want to play that game. Right?
Yeah. Well, in actually in both of my books, there's conflict that goes on between my main character and the TV station manager.
Perfect.
Because the TV station manager is, seeing the clicks and seeing what the potential is, and sometimes that's driving coverage, meaning and which becomes perhaps unnecessary or incorrect or wrong. And that's at other times the story starts to wane, and even though it doesn't have a resolution, the reporters aren't covering it anymore because there's something across the street which is more interesting at that moment in time. And so there's that struggle of how much can I cover this within the constraints of my job, as a journalist.
I think another theme you touch on, and it's the perfect vehicle for it, is misinformation.
Sure.
And a lot of that going around.
Absolutely.
And AI is only making it worse. Now, you can't even believe what you see or hear because it may be AI generated. So, do you believe that your book, either again consciously or maybe even subconsciously, kind of touches on that subject? And are you like, you're expressing your thoughts on that through the characters?
Well, absolutely. And it's not subconsciously, it's consciously, because that's part of the storyline For example, my first book, The Bystander, is that there's this viral clip that happens. There's this story that happens. Guy active shooter is killed by an armed bystander, and he's immediately embraced by, the Second Amendment right as a hero, right? And but then there's other folks, it's a complex argument. Is it gun rights is a complex argument.
Yeah.
There's some people who say, okay, yeah, that it makes it, that's a good thing that people have, you can carry a gun out, in public, right? And then there's other folks who say, well, wait a second, is that the way it's supposed to be? Are we supposed to be have we got to the point in society where, we have, where we have to be, clipped up when we go
Mad Max type of
yeah,
feature, right?
yeah. We got to be armed when we go to the mall to buy sneakers. Right. So there's absolutely those issues are of interest to me. I try not to get too heavy into it. I wrote a work of fiction. It's a mystery novel. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be, escapist. But, I think when you touch on the issues of the day, it makes it more interesting.
So this sounds like a great series for either TV or film. And I think most authors, would give their right arm to have their books translated into film or TV. Have you thought about that? Are you working toward it? And which actor would play your main character?
I knew you were going to say that. Everybody.
Well, good.
So this is funny. So the first thing is that when you write a novel, I sent it to. I wrote my first book. I hired a guy to help me as a developmental editor.
Yeah.
He read first person to really professional person to read my book. And he said, these are all the things that you should work on and fix and change. And then he goes, you need something like, you need some people they call beta readers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, your audience may or may not know what a beta reader is, but a beta reader is someone who you send your manuscript, your unpublished manuscript to, just to get their opinion on it. You're not asking them to make changes line by line. You're just saying, like, does this story work? Right? Do you think does it work? And so I said to my editor, I said, well, how do I get beta readers? He goes, well, you have to find people who don't know you, because if you send it to your friends and family,
right,
they're just going to start casting the movie. Like, they're just going to start coming up and saying, okay, this is who should play this character in the movie. For me, I've been fortunate that I've had a longtime friend of mine. Her daughter works for one of the big talent agencies in California, and she's seen it and she showed it to some other folks, and they thought it was interesting, but they passed. So it's like had a look, kind of thing at that, and I was actually asked the question, what do you think? Would you prefer it to be a movie? Would you prefer it to be a streaming series? And I honestly, Javier, I started laughing so hard I couldn't barely answer the question. I was like, yeah, like, whatever you guys decide.
Yeah,
I mean,
either.
What am I going to say? I'm going to say, if Mr. Cruz is not available, I'm not doing it. And so anyway, I'll leave the casting, who will play who in the movie to the professionals who are good at that.
Yeah.
So.
By the way, I think TV series, right?
TV,
yeah,
sure,
absolutely,
sure.
All right, so some other questions you've probably been asked before, so hopefully you'll have a ready answer. Favorite book of all time?
My favorite book of all time,
or favorite author,
that's
or both.
Really good. So, that's a really good question. My favorite book of all, like, if I only had one book, I could. Right,
it's like choosing between your children. I know.
Yeah, I know it is. It is. I think the book that, quite honestly, the book that got me, that started me to really start like reading thrillers heavily was The Firm by John Grisham.
Oh yeah, excellent book.
And so I think that's even though it's extremely commercial,
Sure,
when you look at it back on it, but when The Firm came out, it was a phenomenon.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a
good movie too.
The movie was fun. And I had a friend of mine who I used to trade, books with and talk about books with. And she called me up and said, she said, have you read this book called The Firm? And I was like, no, what are you talking about? She goes, she was at a conference. She was in banking. And she goes, I'm at this banking conference and no one's in the sessions. Everyone's up in their room in the hotel reading The Firm. And that afternoon, after work, I would drove over to Books and Books back when it was on down the block from where it is now. And I walked in and I walked up to the counter, and Mitch wasn't there. I don't think it was Mitch. It was a Mitch day. He used to be, every once in a while he was there, but I walked up, I said, I'm looking for this book called The Firm. And again, it was just like laughter, and they pointed over there, and there was like this table, and there's like 100 copies of The Firm in paperback. And that's a book that really impacted me as a reader. And just how like a story can really click along, and you can, you finish it in 2 days and go, oh my God, I wish I could read it again,
Yeah. So one day I'm going to walk into Books and Books, and there's going to be a stack of The Pawn or The Bystander, or what's the third one now?
Called The Pretender.
The Pretender, and it would be a stack of books, right?
That'd be cool. That'd be cool.
Where did you have your book launch? I'm curious.
I actually did a signing at Books and Books, which was a lot of fun. And I've done some other done a few other bookstores around the state. I've traveled a little bit to do it. So it's been fun.
You're on the road.
Like it's you got to put your books in people's hands. There's it's a real challenge these days to get your book seen at every stage. Getting your book seen is a big challenge.
How much of your sales would you say are Amazon versus kind of bookstores?
Oh, so my publisher is actually what they call digital first.
Okay.
So they don't push into bookstores.
Oh,
so you can order my books at the bookstore, but they're not going to be like on the shelf. They can order it. You can order it. And so if I go and reach out to a bookstore and say, hey, I want to come and do a signing, they can get a box.
Gotcha.
So
99%.
99% is going to be it's going to be through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, that kind of thing.
All right. So now let's get into some advice you may have for writers. We'll start with the writing process itself. It's hard to write a book.
Yeah.
Right. Writer's block, everything else. There's the actual writing, and then there's creating the story and the dialogue. It's a difficult craft. Some are better at it than others. But what have you found that worked for you that might work for others? 1, 2, 3 kind of pieces of advice you might have on the writing itself.
Sure. I think the first thing is that you have to find the process that works for you. And I think that coincidentally, I heard an interview with John Grisham pretty recently, and he says, well, you have to write every day. Every day you have to write.
Some people say that.
You have to write every day. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay. So like, how much do you have in the bank? Like you can, the rest of us are not, we're not there. Like we're not, I can't write.
We have day jobs.
I can't write every day. I don't have time to write every day. So you find the process that works for you. Right. And for some people, I guess that's getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and, getting their coffee and getting in front of whatever their device is or a legal pad or whatever and doing it.
That's not you.
That's not me. So I write in fits and starts, and when I get inspired, and I try to put ideas down. I do a lot of dictating, because I find that ideas come from my brain to my mouth quicker than they can come to my hand. And so I do a dictate, and then I go back.
Especially when you first get up, I'm like, it's just, maybe you had a dream about it.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
I'm not even awake enough to write.
Absolutely. But so for me, a lot of it is that I do dictating because it helps me. The thoughts kind of roll out of my head faster than I can write them down. Mm-hmm. And that's part of my process. But I think you have to find what works for you. Right. And everyone's going to be a little bit different. There are still people out there who like write out longhand. I mean, how they do it, I don't know. I mean, but that's their process, and they probably look at mine and go, mine's crazy, right? So I think that's the first thing is find it. And then it's the same thing. The advice I usually give like professional people when they say, well, tell me about like social media. And I always say, well, you start by starting. So you have to you got to start. You got to start somewhere, and that maybe it's an outline. Maybe it's you dream up what your first chapter is. Maybe you come up with you come up with some characters. You can go and there's workshops out there. There's all kinds of people who will teach you. But you have to start and take that step and be okay with the fact that it may not be so great in the beginning. I mean, it would probably be really interesting for me to go back and look at my very first draft of my very first book, first chapter of my first book, and see what it would look like.
I think I want to burn mine.
Yeah, it was, but the DNA is there, right? That's the thing, is the DNA is there, the idea is there, and that's and then I would say, so the first thing is work on it, and then you have to power through all these levels of self-doubt, which are going to, which are going to happen.
Imposter syndrome, we all have.
And the idea that you might get, if you think about it, a typical fiction novel, 60, 70, 80,000 words, and you might get 15,000 words, out of you, and you no idea if you don't know if it's good or not. You might think it's good, but it may not be good, and you have to kind of get to a point where if you're going to write a novel, that you are able to put forth, a novel length work, to get that first draft done.
Yeah. Yours is the perfect length, by the way. And if it starts to get too thick, I turn away. But that's something you can take to the beach over a long weekend.
I love it. I've been very flattered that folks have said to me, like, I read your book in 2 days. I read your book in a weekend. I'm like, perfect. It's like, I'm not there. If you get, it
doesn't have to be War and Peace.
Listen, everyone's got their own, I don't pass judgment. Everyone has their own, somebody might look at my book and go, it's too quick, just pulpy or whatever.
Now, quickly, because we're out of time, but on the I guess the publishing or maybe the promotional side of the equation, and you're quite expert at this, being a publicist yourself. Something unique that you've done that works well that you might provide some advice about in selling your book. Is there anything that you have found out of the ordinary that kind of works? Or is it just kind of the old tried and true?
I think I think you have to try to like knock on as many doors as you can knock on. Because I've the one thing when I first started with my publisher, there's all the authors on that are with my publisher are on a message board. And so they, you kind of get introduced, here's the new author, and you reply back to, and everybody says welcome and everything. And I replied back, like, anybody has any like marketing tips, let me know. And, the universal response was, well, if we all knew what was working, we would all be doing it, So everything works differently for different folks. Some people do better with in-person things, selling their own books. Some people do better with signing. Some people try to do well with social media.
Yeah. It is a digital world we live in. So.
And you have to try a lot of different things and see what works for you.
Well, clearly something's working for you. You're doing well. And if people want to learn more about you, about your book, where should they go? Sure.
My website is byjohndavid.com. So
byjohndavid.com.
And so that has information on the books. It's a Substack, so it has a newsletter if you want to subscribe. You don't have to subscribe to read it, what's on there. But it has reviews and background and bios and all that kind of stuff. And so that's where you can buy it. And my books are available basically everywhere you can buy a book online.
Excellent.
So any place like that. And so
well, John, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Success. I wish you more success and a great launch on your third book. When is that coming out?
In March.
March. Okay. Yep. We got a date.
Right.
Until then, and by the way, come back on the show when it launches and we'll talk about the third installment.
Fantastic.
Right? And then
I appreciate that.
Come back again when it becomes a famous movie. Bring the actor.
That's right.
Right. Folks, that's all the time we have here on the Miami Book Hub. I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank Miami's Community Newspapers for hosting and producing the program. Special thanks to Emily behind the camera back there. If you're interested in seeing other guests, we have, I want to say 8 authors lined up here. So through the end of September, please come on back, like us, subscribe, share this with your friends. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Miami's Community Newspapers website. So we're easy to find. Let's see. Yeah. Every Thursday, actually, you're going to have to edit that out because this is recorded. So yes, please continue to check us out. And in the meantime, stay curious. No, I screwed that one up too. Fuck. You'd think I'd know this by now. So yeah, keep coming on back. If you like us, if you like this program, like it, subscribe, share with your friends and family. We have some great guests lined up. So please stay tuned for future episodes. And in the meantime, keep writing, keep reading, and stay curious, Miami.